Good morning and welcome to the annual 9/11 ceremony at Port St. Lucie High School. Please stand for the presentation of the colors and the Pledge of Allegiance by the Port St. Lucie High School Jaguar Battalion.
Art time! Art! Color yard! Halt! Left, ace! Colors, left!
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing till the colors exit the building.
Right, ace! Forward, art! Left, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, left, 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 right, left, left, right, left, right, left.
You may be seated. Now, I'd like to introduce Deputy Milton Rosario. He is a veteran of the New York Police Department. He was also at Ground Zero when 9/11 had taken place. Today, he will share a presentation about his experiences on that dreadful day.
Good morning. So, this morning I get a phone call from a friend of mine, and he says, "Hey, what are you doing today? What are you doing for September 11th?" I said, "I'm going to go talk to a couple of friends of mine." So, a couple of friends of mine. So, the events of September 11th, 2001 are super important. Why are they important? Because they're part of American history. A short time after it happened, I started to want to forget. Like, I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to deal with it. People would mention it, and I'd be like, you know what, I'm out. I'm just walk out, go somewhere else, talk about something else. And then this old timer, an old veteran friend of mine, came up to me and he said, "Hey, what do you know about Pearl Harbor?" I'm like, "Pearl Harbor? Well, I know A, B, C, D." Started to tell him things that I knew about Pearl Harbor. And he said, "You know, you only know that because somebody that was there decided that it was really important to talk about it for people like you that weren't there." And it clicked. And then from that moment on, I was like, you know what, it's okay to talk about it. Because there are people that have no idea. Show of hands, who was born in 2001? 2002? 2003? 2004? 2005? There are many, many people that just weren't around. I've been doing this is my 6th year now. And a couple of years ago, a kid came up to me and said, after everything was over, everybody had left the auditorium, and this one kid stood behind me. And he's like, "You know what? I have an uncle that was a firefighter. And I've heard my family talk about it my entire life, but I didn't know what it was. Like, I knew what it was, but I didn't know what it was." And so my hope today is to be able to bring you there from the safety of the Port St. Lucie High School auditorium. And I will. I'm going to take you to September 11th, 2001. We're going to have video. I'm going to put you on a police helicopter. You're going to be inside a police helicopter. You're going to see the planes going into the building. You're going to be in the middle of the recovery operation. You're going to see both buildings coming down. Actually, you're going to see and hear the agony in people's voices and in their face At the end of this presentation, I'm pretty sure that you're gonna know when somebody talks about September 11th and the World Trade Center, I'm pretty sure you're gonna be like, it makes sense, it clicks. And there's a very big difference between reading about something and seeing it. I'm a visual learner, I'm a tactile learner. When I see things, it clicks, it makes sense to me. And I'm pretty sure there are some out there that are the same. How many, show of hands, how many people here plan on going in the military after they're done with school? How many people have family in the military? How many people know friends that are in the military? All this is relevant to you because we fight wars that stem from incidents like this. A little bit about me. Here's the thing. Anytime I sit through a lecture or anytime I listen to somebody at a presentation, I want to know who they are. How is this person talking to me? Do they know what they're talking about because they read a book, a pamphlet, because they went to school, or did they live it? So, a little bit about me. Obviously, you know, I'm Deputy Rosario. I'm your school resource deputy. I've been here for about 6 years. Have over 30 years of law enforcement experience. I'm retired from the NYPD, and unless you're from New York, these numbers really don't mean much. But I've worked at the 72nd Precinct, the 60th Precinct, the 70 Precinct, and the 67 Precinct. Which, by the way, the 67 Precinct at I think it was 92 or 91, had more homicides in that one geographical precinct than 13 states. I worked in Vice, and when I retired from Narcotics Division of the Organized Crime Control Bureau. I've lectured at the Police Academy, and I'm a former teacher at Treasure Coast High School, so I taught high school at Treasure Coast. Some pictures, and my current employer, Sheriff Mascara. So let's dig in here. The World Trade Center. The incident happened on September 11th, 2001, right? Those are the two towers. Those are the two big, when you say World Trade Center, that's what people think of, the two towers. There were 7 buildings altogether. These two towers, 110 stories high. The owners were the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, so the owners of the area were, let's just say that the government of New York and New Jersey owned the World Trade Center site there. The groundbreaking began in 1966, a year before I was born, doing math. And they opened in 1973. And they were destroyed in September 11th of 2001. That's what they looked like on September 11th. When you hear the attacks of the World Trade Center, people automatically think New York City, right? But the US Pentagon was also hit on that day. And another plane came down or was brought down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania on that day. Here's the thing, the terrorists wanted to attack America. How do you attack a country, right? So the World Trade Center, the symbol of America's financial might, they attacked it. The US Pentagon, the symbol of American military might, they attacked it. And then the last plane was headed towards the Capitol, a symbol of America's government. And if not for a group of really brave, heroic Americans that brought that plane down in Shanksville, that's exactly where that plane was headed. Let's talk about the timeline. And we're setting the groundwork here for what's to come, the videos and all that other stuff, right? So, 8:46 in the morning, September 11th, 18 years from today. 8:46 in the morning, Flight 11 crashes into the 93rd through the 99th floor of the North Tower. You're going to see that coming up in like 2 slides. 9:03, Flight 175 crashes into floors 77 through 85 of the South Tower. North Tower gets hit first, South Tower gets hit right after. 9:37, Flight 77, right there, crashes into the Pentagon's western facade. And then, like we had said, 10:03, Flight 93 goes down and is brought down in Shanksville. This is the first of a number of videos. This will take you inside the World Trade Center. Nobody here, I don't think, has ever gone inside the old World Trade Center. There's no audio on this particular video. This is a tourist video. They were filming, and you'll be able to see the hallway. You'll be able to see the elevator. It'll take you up to the 107th floor. Notice how fast it'll get you there. And you'll be able to see the World Trade Center from the inside before the attacks. Like I said, there's no audio on this particular one. When they get up to the 107th floor, you'll see that'll be the indoor observation deck. There's an outdoor observation deck as well. The indoor observation deck, huge windows. You'll be able to see out. From those windows, you'll be able to see the state of New Jersey across the river. And then you look down and you see cars that look like ants. It's 107 stories high. And there you go. You are now 107 stories up. That's New Jersey across the river there. You're in New York and you're looking across the river towards New Jersey. And look at those the cars. Whenever I went up there, it always baffled me how small things looked. This next video here, and during the presentation, I'm gonna go back and forth. I'm gonna show you videos and bring you there, and then I'm gonna tell you, at a certain point, I'm gonna start telling you what I experienced, where I was at the time and what I was doing, and then it's gonna be an awesome marriage. I'm gonna tell you about me and then show you the video. During this slide here, there is a documentary, a film being recorded at a firehouse. They're putting together a documentary. So the filmmakers, the camera people, are embedded at the firehouse. They're just there. They're there 24 hours a day. They sleep there. They eat with the firemen. They're filming. They're documenting the life of a firefighter. Chief Pfeiffer, that's him right there, he goes out on a call. New York City, there's all sorts of pipes and tunnels and all sorts of stuff underground. So occasionally, often, you'll get like the smell of gas or something, and people will call, the fire department will come out, they'll scan the area with meters, and they'll call the appropriate people and they'll take care of it. That's what's happening right there. Chief Pfeiffer is taking the camera crew out so that they can go with him as he inspects an area, right? I'm gonna put this on. At a certain point, you're gonna see the plane fly over and crash right into the northern tower. Remember, the northern tower gets hit first. At a certain point of the video, I'm gonna mute it. Why? Because the firefighters are taken aback. and they're kind of saying things that, although it's not horrible, I really don't need to show it to, I don't need to play it to get the point across. So, this is Chief Pfeiffer here.
So Pfeiffer, videotape.
It was just another call, or he was the battalion chief.
It was basically camera practice. See, Jules had only been shooting for a few weeks. Before that, Gideon was the main cameraman.
Every time the battalion goes, I go. You know, I just need to practice, so I shoot. And I don't stop.
We checked the area with meters, and it was kind of routine and pretty simple.
It was 8:46 in the morning.
And then we heard a plane come over, and in Manhattan, you don't hear planes too often, especially loud ones.
That's the first plane. Notice straight in. Straight in. Not only did it go straight in, there are parts of the plane, there are parts of the building coming out on all three other sides. They're flying out. As the TV reporters are talking about the first plane, they're reporting on it, the second plane comes into view, the reporter stops talking, and you see the second plane going into the South Tower. Notice all the stuff that's flying out of the side. It'll play on slow-mo now. I want you to notice that side of the building as well, and notice everything that flies out. Right there. Those aren't small pieces. Those are huge pieces of steel flying out. As a matter of fact, I can recall when I got there, the World Trade Center, part of it sits on a roadway called the West Side Highway. It's about 4 lanes in each direction. Across all 8 lanes, there's a building. There's a bunch of buildings, but the one building across the road, I remember when I got to the area, there was a piece of steel, a piece of building, probably this like 20 feet by 20 feet, that had impaled the side of the building. It had just like a hot knife, taking a hot knife and putting it through butter and then cooling it down, and it just stood there. I remember looking at this building. Not only did I see like the World Trade Center crazy stuff, but then I looked across and I'm like, how in the world did a piece of steel, 20 by 20 at least, just impale itself on the side of this building? Let me go back. At the time, I was assigned to narcotics. And I had done an operation the night before, and it ran pretty late. So that morning, I was home sleeping, and my phone rings. And for some reason, I hadn't muted my phone or taking the wire off. Like back then, that's what you did to like have the phone not ring. My phone rings, and I pick it up. I'm still in a daze, and I'm like, hello? And it's a friend of mine. And my friend says, hurry up and turn on the TV. So I turn on the TV, and I'm like, what in the world? Is this real? And I see the news reports talking about this plane going into the World Trade Center. And I'm like, holy cow, I gotta get up and I gotta get there. This is gonna be a huge crime scene. Like, nobody needs to call me, I need to go. I had been, by the way, September 11th, 2001 was not the first time that the World Trade Center had been attacked. It was attacked in 93 as well. And I was there in 93, so I knew that that was a huge crime scene. So I jump out of bed, turn on the shower. I think I kind of like walked through the shower, got dressed, and ran downstairs. Jumped in my car, and poof, I was on my way. Until I wasn't anymore. Because for a first responder, the worst thing that can happen is like you're going somewhere and all of a sudden traffic comes to a halt. And I was on the highway and I'm flying and then I see brake lights everywhere. And we came to a halt. And I looked to my left, I was on the Staten Island Expressway, I lived in Staten Island. I was on the Staten Island Expressway and I looked to my left and I see the smoke coming out. And I can see the World Trade Center in the distance, the smoke coming out. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I get from here to there as fast as possible? I'm stuck. Short time later, an emergency lane opened up and I was on my way again. New York City is made up of 5 boroughs: Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx. I lived in Staten Island. To get to Lower Manhattan, I needed to drive through Staten Island, get onto the Verrazano Bridge. If anybody remembers or has seen the movie Saturday Night Fever, that's the bridge. I got onto the Staten Island, the Verrazano Bridge. Then I had to get onto, in Brooklyn, I had to get onto the Gowanus Expressway, which would then lead me to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, which would go underground and bring me up into Lower Manhattan. So I get to the Verrazano, cross the Verrazano, get onto the Gowanus Expressway, and as I'm driving, I start seeing things coming down. I'm still an entire county away from Lower Manhattan. And I look up, and I remember looking up going, that looks like paper. It's raining paper? How can it be raining paper? I later found out that that paper was from the World Trade Center. That's how hard the towers got hit. Paper went flying an entire county away. This is a video of a first responder heading there. I was coming south, heading north. I was south, I was driving north to the World Trade Center. This particular video is a first responder north heading south to the World Trade Center. The point of the video is that you'll see what a first responder saw as they headed down to the Trade Center. You'll see the smoke in the background. That's what I saw, only coming from the opposite direction. That's the World Trade Center over there. What's really weird is that roadway is never like that, especially at that time. That roadway is always full. But notice everybody's leaving the area on the opposite side. Nobody's heading there except for first responders. Everybody's leaving, first responders are heading in. So, remember, I'm on the Gowanus, I see paper coming down, I'm still driving, I'm like, this is bad. As I keep driving further, I'm like, this is really bad. I get to the mouth of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, right before I get into the tunnel, and I start seeing like black on the other side. The sky is starting to turn black. I'm like, holy cow, never ever even like imagined anything like this. I see an ambulance on the side of the road, and I say to myself, I'm going to stop. I'm going to get a paper mask, because that seems like, you know, something that would be necessary over there. Get a paper mask and try to not breathe in whatever's over there. So I pulled over, got a paper mask, and I'm coming back to my car, and I look across the roadway, and I see somebody. I see one of my old sergeants. Remember, I was working in '93 when the first attack happened. I was a young cop, and back then, that particular sergeant, that supervisor of mine, had assigned me, in '93, had assigned me to an intersection. And he told me, whatever you have to do, you need to make sure that traffic can flow. There's 1,000,001 emergency vehicles coming to go down to the World Trade Center. You need to make sure that this roadway is clear. Fast forward, 2001, I'm about to go into the tunnel, and I look across, and there's that supervisor of mine, and he's doing the same thing. He's making sure that the roadway is clear enough for people to get through, emergency vehicles to get through. This guy was a great supervisor. He's somebody that I admired. He's somebody that taught me a lot. He was a father figure. And I looked across, and he gave me a look and a nod, as if to say, be careful. And I looked at him, and I gave him a look and a nod. And I got in my car. And I went in, started driving into the tunnel. And I'm thinking to myself, am I coming back? Like, this is super creepy. And then I hear something. As I'm driving in, this is September, there's no snow anywhere in sight, it's a beautiful day. I start hearing the humming of snow underneath my tires. If anybody has driven on snow, you know what I'm talking about. There's a humming under my car. And I look down, and I'm trying to figure things out, and it's ash. Like, there are inches of ash. I'm driving inside the tunnel on top of inches of ash and soot and debris. Starts getting dark in the tunnel. Headlights go on. I drive in, make my way into the tunnel, trying to figure out what's ahead of me, and get to the other side. I look up once I get to the other side, and I'm like, oh my God. I've never seen this. And I've driven through that tunnel hundreds of times. And I get to the other side, and I'm dumbfounded. Remember, we're going back and forth. This is what it looked like on the Manhattan side. You're gonna see like people that were doing the same thing that I was doing, heading in. Emergency responders, first responders, doing exactly what I was doing, just heading in. My story isn't anything special. I just happened to be here. There are hundreds of first responders like me that did the same exact thing. You'll see people leaving Manhattan, and you're going to see first responders heading in. Look how black that smoke is. Again, everybody's heading out of Manhattan. Everybody's leaving. At this point, the building is fully engulfed. There are people on top of the fire that are so incredibly desperate. It is so hot that it is better for them to go outside the building, maybe 105, 106, 100 stories up, go outside of the building and try to rappel down, try to climb down. They're thinking it's better for me to climb down than to be in here and burn. There are people that said, I'm done, and they jumped. And I don't have that picture here, I didn't want to include it, but there's a picture, it's a real famous picture called The Jumping Man. And that's a man that just fell out, just jumped out. And he's upside down, and the photographer from the ground captured that picture, and you see him upside down. He's got one leg up and one leg curled up. It's a really famous picture. You can find it online. It was horrible for those people inside there. The South Tower, although it got hit second, it was the first to come down. And there were people in Lower Manhattan everywhere. Remember, it's 110 stories up. So you can see that from anywhere in Lower Manhattan, pretty much. And there were people watching the building on fire. They may have had friends that worked there, loved ones that worked there. They may have worked there. And so they're seeing this building that everybody treasures in New York. And all of a sudden, the building starts coming down. And you're gonna see just that right now. And you will hear the agony, the hurt, the pain in the voices of those around. This is the beginning of the end. you ever felt pain for anybody, you will recognize that in this clip here. Once the building starts coming down. That's a police helicopter up on top. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a little bit. Is it starting to seem real? Starting to make sense in a different way? Like I said in the beginning, it's one thing to read about it or to hear about it. It's a totally different thing to actually see it and experience it from a safe place. So after the South Tower went down, the news, again, the news reporters are reporting on the one tower that's coming down when the next thing you know, they're caught off guard. The North Tower starts coming down and you'll hear the reporter and they mistakenly report that parts of the building have come down when in all actuality we know that the entire buildings had come down, but from his vantage point, from what he was seeing, he couldn't tell. So you'll hear the reporter now.
As one of the witnesses to these extraordinary events this morning here in New York. And I know that for many of you, you've heard this a lot, but I think it's important as people join us, as they do, in moments like this. They are coming in all the time, that there have been attacks in 2 American cities, New York and in Washington. The trade centers here in New York have been hit by airplanes. In Washington, there is a large fire at the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been evacuated. And there, as you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the top portion of which is collapsing. Good Lord. There are no words. You can see large pieces of the building falling. You can see the smoke rising. You can see a portion of the side of the building now just being covered on the right side as I look at it, covered in smoke. This is just a horrific scene and a horrific moment. The president, who is in Florida today, is en route back to the White House. He took off a short time ago. The White House itself has been evacuated on the basis of what the Secret Service says was a credible threat on the mansion itself. We believe now that we can say that portions of both towers of the World Trade.
So you have 2 views. You have the control view, the second one, where the reporter's talking calmly, and then you have the view from the street where you actually hear the people and the people's reaction to what was happening. let's go back to where I was. I get to Lower Manhattan. I get out of my car and I'm dumbfounded. I see our chief of department, the highest ranking member of the NYPD, and I run up to him. During my time in narcotics, I was supposed to be driving up stolen tractor trailers from Philadelphia into New York. So the department had sent me to tractor trailer school, tractor trailer training. I have a tractor trailer license. I can drive anything. I've driven bulldozers. I can drive anything. And so I run up to the chief. I'm like, I can drive anything we have. What do you need me to do? He was with the chief of Special Operations Division. He assigned me to the chief of Special Operations Division, the chief of SOD, Special Operations Division, and I were walking around trying to figure out, what can you move? What do you, I mean, we can chain something to a bus and we can move it. Really nothing at that time that could have been done. So the chief of SOD and I are walking around, and it's a madhouse. We separate. We somehow or another become separated. And I'm walking towards the buildings, and I'm about a block away, block and a half away, and I look up, and I am saying to myself, is that another building coming down? And sure enough, the building starts coming down and you hear boom, 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 boom. And I'm just standing there like a deer in headlights. And all of a sudden, I say to myself, this stuff is coming down, but it's not just staying down, it's coming towards me and every other place. And so I say, you better get out of here. I turn around and I start running. And I am running full speed with everything I have. And I start coming to the realization in my mind, I'm saying this is catching up to me. The smoke is catching me, the debris, there's stuff flying around. I can hear things crashing around behind me. And I start saying to myself, holy cow, this is how you're going to die. It's going to happen today. And I'm running. And I see an ambulance. That's not the ambulance. This is just a picture of an ambulance so I can get you in the right mindset. So I see an ambulance and I say to myself, if I can make it inside the back of that ambulance, maybe, just maybe, I can make it. And so I get to the back of the ambulance. As I get there, I'm like, I'm going to be the only smart guy. I grab the knob, I lift it up, I turn it, I pull the door open, and I see there's a can of sardines in there, because there's a bunch of people in there. I was not the only person that was thinking the same thing. So I get up, put my foot on that right there, and push my way up, push my way in, close the door, turn the knob, and I hear, whoosh. That's it. I don't remember anything else. Has anybody seen the movie Saving Private Ryan? You remember there's a beach scene where he comes up on, he's on the beach somehow or another, and he can't hear anything, he's just walking around in like this stupor. He's just walking around. So I got to the ambulance, I pushed my way in, I closed the door, I heard what I heard, and the next memory that I have is I'm walking in Lower Manhattan, somewhere, I don't remember where, but I'm walking like this. Because there was this much ash and soot and debris on the ground. I don't know to this day. I don't know how I got out of that ambulance. I don't know. We were all like ashy from the dust. I don't know if I was on the ground. I don't know if somebody pulled me out. I have no idea. To this day, I don't know. I know that I came to and I was walking in Lower Manhattan somehow or another. This is what it looked like from somebody else's perspective when the dust came. What I told you about, the dust, the debris is chasing, watch this. That's some crazy cameraman that just stood around and just waited. That's what it looked like when everything started chasing me. That's how thick that was. One moment, there's sun. The next moment, it's pitch dark. If you were to put your hand in front of your face, you wouldn't know it's there. In this next video, a reporter's interviewing a lady, and she has her kid. And another building comes down, building 7 comes down, and you'll see how when it comes down, you have to get out of there because, again, comes down, starts heading towards you. There's stuff flying around in that debris, in that dust.
To come, as you mentioned,
Monica, I have to go to Ashley Banfield. They might have had something on the ground. Ashley?
Well, at first we had thought, Brian, that we'd heard another explosion, but I think it's just another truck that's heading down to the south. But I just wanted to let you know that we're starting to see people moving north. In fact, you were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. You've got Carolina here.
Yes.
They advised us to leave because we had... Oh my God. Look behind us. Please pan in this way. Please be careful of your baby. This is it. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. No. No. Listen. We'll be all right. We'll be all right.
Ashley! I think we're okay. Ashley,
Run, Ashley.
All right. We're going to have to move this way. We're going to have to move. We're going to have to move. That cloud is coming this way.
Yeah. Ashley, get out of there. Leave the camera on, man, if you need to, and get out of there.
Ashley better run and run fast. So, again, first responders, they're down there. There are people everywhere. There's a point where I want you to see this first responder. There's a fireman, and he's a mess. He's got ash like everybody else, from the top to the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. There's ash. He's covered in ash. So much so that he takes off his bunker, his bunker gear, the firefighter's jacket. He takes it off, and he's walking around. And there's a gentleman and a lady, and she can't see. There's so much dust in her eyes that she can't see, and he's a mess as well. And this firefighter, although he's messed up, he grabs them and starts walking them to an ambulance that has water. There's an ambulance there, but he's looking for one that has water so that they can clear their eyes out. Firefighter right there, just trying to get them some help. I worked with this cop. His name was Jimmy Chacon. Jimmy and I were cops together in the 72nd precinct. He was a pilot, and so he put in to go to the aviation unit, and on September 11th, he was the pilot on the police helicopter. And, you know, being friends with him, I'm like, was there anything that could have been done? There was nothing. He couldn't land the helicopter up on top. There are people that say, well, why couldn't, you know, they land the helicopter up on top? And imagine if you're on top and something happens, now you have the building which is still standing, but now you have a helicopter coming down 110 stories on top of everybody else. There's nobody to rescue up there. There's nothing that they could have done, the air unit. I know that's sometimes a question that comes up. This next video is the view from inside the police helicopter. You'll see Jimmy on the right.
The wounds of September 11 have been reopened in the United States with the release of helicopter pics showing the moment the Twin Towers came down. For the first time, the vision has received widespread coverage in the mainstream media. As terrified US authorities grounded aircraft across the country, the officers on board this NYPD chopper were given a unique view of the day that changed America. Filming with a handycam in the back seat, the crew flies in close to the Twin Towers, alight but still standing after impact. They'd hoped to rescue survivors from the rooftops, but there was no one for them to pick up. As New Yorkers ran through the streets, the police chopper landed in a local park. The moment the first building collapsed isn't recorded, but the crew is back in the air just moments later. It's gone! It's the whole tower! It's gone! Holy crap! They knocked the whole freaking thing down! As smoke and debris engulfed the city, the officers listen in to panicked police radio. It was worse than any of them could fathom, with nearly 3,000 victims. Minutes later, the chopper lands again, filming as the North Tower collapses. Reality finally sets in. That's it. That's the biggest disaster in the world. The video, previously leaked to a TV station and now released under Freedom of Information, is getting plenty of airplay.
We have a new perspective on
another reminder of how New York's cityscape and America's sense of security will never be the same. In the United States, Daniel Sutton, 10 News.
All right, so the buildings come down. We're there trying to, there are two phases. There's a rescue phase, which is immediately after the incident, where you try to rescue people. And then sometime later, somebody in authority will say it's now a recovery operation, where you're basically looking for people's remains. And this next video will bring you into ground zero, where after people were just, you were there looking to see if you can find survivors at first. And then, like I said, you were there to find people's remains.
I remember the first thing was you couldn't believe it. You just couldn't believe it. It was beyond the scope of imagination. It wasn't a building, it wasn't two buildings, it was blocks. Walking was almost impossible. With all the steel and intertwined, a shovel would just bounce off one piece. If it's one piece of steel, it's just going to bounce off. The only way to do it was to force your hands down under there and lift it up and put it in the bucket. That's how most of the buckets were filled. The most dangerous job site I've ever seen in my life. Just danger everywhere. But
feet was the reason you were there.
There were no direct orders, no one person or group in command. Those in the bucket lines were solemn and intently...
Let me stop for a second. They happened to catch my team. This guy here, his name is Joey Morales. Joey had just gotten surgery on his hip and on his knee months before. Joey was there every day, shoulder to shoulder with everybody else. He worked as hard, if not harder, than all of us. You put things aside and you get the job done. And Joey did an amazing job.
Focused.
That's me with the yellow
pants. Yourself moving further and further, up, around, and down in to the center of what used to be the towers. We made it to the absolute front. There was usually about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 guys. That was the circle of digging. That was the circle of prying, of ripping, of cutting. And when you got there to the front, you didn't want to leave. You're there. If you're going to make a difference, that's the place to be. So you stayed there as long as you possibly could. And for me, I stayed there until my hands didn't work anymore.
What's the easiest way to move things from the bottom? A shovel. Like he said, you couldn't use shovels. So you just grab things and put them in buckets. There was a line, they called it the bucket brigade. There was a line, and you would take things and put it in a bucket and pass it. You'd take things, put it in a bucket, fill the bucket, pass it. We had hundreds, thousands of buckets, and we just filled the buckets and passed them along. Excuse me. You remember a lot of things, and a lot of things you try to forget. There's one thing that I try to forget, and that is so hard to forget. It's probably the most difficult thing for me, and I'm so glad that I can talk about it. And that's going subhuman. I like to call it subhuman. Because I had been a detective for a while, so I had seen death, I had seen people die, I had seen people who had died for a long time. That doesn't bother you after a while. But while we were there, we would look for people's remains. We would look for people that were underground and had died. And if you thought that you were close to somebody's remains, you would turn around and you would call for a cadaver dog. You would call for a dog, just like drug dogs, they know the scent of drugs. A cadaver dog smells the smell of decaying human flesh, rotting human flesh. And he will signal you that there's somebody that's dead here. Well, here's the thing. Dogs can only work for so long until you have to put them up. You have to rest them. And there aren't that many cadaver dogs. So what we had to do was we would be on the pile and we would look and pull and pull. And if we thought that we were close to somebody's remains, we would go down on our hands and knees and we would remove our masks and we would look around and smell for the smell of human flesh, decaying human flesh. To me, that's been like the craziest thing. To me, like, it's one thing to know what it smells like, but to go looking for it, for me, was the hardest thing of everything to get through. there were different things that we found, and we would, put them in buckets. I remember we dug up a minivan and we pried it open with Kelly tools and different tools, and sticking our hands in there and pulling out a teddy bear, and then pulling out flesh, pulling out meat. I remember finding sneakers with feet inside, flesh inside, and that's all that you would see, charred flesh. Once everything was removed from Lower Manhattan, it was put onto a barge or trucked out to Staten Island. Staten Island had a landfill that wasn't used anymore, and that's where everything was shipped to. Everything was brought there. For what? Every inch had to be scrutinized. There are people that are missing, and so there are detectives that are assigned there. We would work 12-hour shifts there, and we would show up, and I still remember there was this one lady. One person can make such an impact and such a big difference. We're now in 2019, and I'm still talking about this one lady. When you drove into the landfill, there was a lady that stood outside every day. Rain, shine, didn't matter. She was outside. And all she had was a sign that said, "Thank you." That's it. It just said, "Thank you." And I'm still talking about that lady because it made such an impact on all of us. We would drive in, we would park on the bottom part. They had buses that would bus us up to the top of the landfill, and then they brought up truckloads of the debris, and they would put the debris on conveyor belts, and the conveyor belts would bounce around and they would go by us. And there were probably 10 of us detectives. We had on Tyvek suits and masks. We looked like Teletubbies. And we had 2 buckets, one for human remains and one for personal effects. And things would just come by us. And we would sit there for 12 hours. We would get breaks, but for 12 hours, we had a conveyor belt coming by us. We did that for part of the shift. And then the second shift, there was an area where there was stuff on the ground, and you took rakes and you would rake through stuff, and you would look for, human remains or identification cards or things like that. We put them in the specific bucket, human remains or personal effects. Here's a video of the Staten Island landfill. There's a chief, Chief Ali is his name. He died last year from cancer related to the World Trade Center. There's hundreds of first responders that have died from the stuff that was breathed in that day. And in the days, the weeks, and the months that followed, we were still there for months after. I want you to listen to Chief Ali. It's towards the end of this particular video. He's fine. He's talking and he's being interviewed, and then the reporter happens to push one particular button. And I want you to listen to the change in his voice. The reporter asks him, he says, "These are your men. What do you think?" That they're looking for his men. He's looking for his cops that have died. And listen to how his voice changes. Like I said, he died last year.
Working working at the World Trade Center have found the bodies of 3 people holding hands in the rubble. More than 5,000 remain missing. That means only about 2% of the bodies have been found. You'll understand why the going is so slow when you see the place where the debris is being taken. Ours were the first cameras allowed onto the site where hundreds of people are sifting through a mountain of evidence. This is the morgue for a monument. All of the wreckage of the World Trade Center is being carried by truck and barge to this abandoned landfill on Staten Island, 18 miles from the scene of the attack. It is here that the sorting will be done, the separation of building, human remains, and evidence.
Windows, 2 full window section. It's American Airlines. The sad part is you can just vision people looking out the damn windows, you know.
2 window frames with the distinctive blue stripe of American Airlines. This would be part of Flight 11 from Boston, the 767 jumbo jet that led the attack. Sergeant Ray Sheehan is responsible for cataloging the evidence.
At times we're pulling out seats which you can identify as being from an airplane because of the armrest mechanism moves, because of the seat belts. But most of the parts we're pulling out are small.
Walk along the remains and you notice 2 things. First, there's no color. It's all shades of gray. Second, almost nothing here is familiar. No obvious objects, no hint of humanity. New York City Chief of Detectives William Ali runs this part of the crime scene investigation.
Chief, when we're over there, everything is just pulverized. What are you finding in there that you can recognize?
You have to understand something about New York City detectives. This is what we do. This is what we are. We don't overlook anything. And we look for not only for things that can help in the investigation, but to try to find something, whether it's the remains of someone, something personal, some identification, a piece of equipment, to be able to give back to the family members, to the people who are lost.
Finding what has been lost is painstaking labor, trying to make sense of the debris, and sometimes finding something whole, like an honorary plaque that might have hung in an office.
Your men are finding some personal effects, of course, in all of this. What are some of the ones that stick in your mind that you've seen?
ID cards from employers. I find it amazing that through all the debris, through all the devastation, that these wallets stay intact with people, that the identification cards are ripped up and mutilated, but in a lot of cases they aren't.
You have refrigerated trucks here.
That is correct.
And it goes to the medical examiner for possible DNA typing at a later time.
DNA is done on every single body part we recover.
Dogs are working this mix of mud and steel, searching for the scent of a victim, because what the workers are looking for is often too small to see. We saw helmets of police officers, smashed respirators of police officers.
Listen to his voice.
And firemen. Those are your men. Yeah. What do you think when you see that equipment?
Well, like you said, it's a bunch of us were there in the bathroom and kind of escaped the grace of God. And we think about that could have been us that they were looking for.
New York's police commissioner Bernie Carrick came to the landfill to encourage the men and women who are working in the filth and the dust and the stench. Who are these men and women?
So we have about 300 to 400 people up here right now, not including the military. There's a guy up here that's 79 years old. He retired from the police department 31 years ago. And he's up here working with these kids, sifting through the evidence.
I can't imagine anything more heartbreaking than being in there with a rake for 12 hours.
How do they do it? It takes a toll on you mentally, it takes a toll on you physically, but you're devoted, and everyone out here is devoted to getting the job done.
Among the only colors found in the gray debris have been these. They are the stars and stripes that flew in the plaza between the towers, Liberty Plaza. Those who work below them now are searching for remains that might allow a family to wrap a flag around a coffin and reclaim one more name from a field of lost souls.
And these are just some of my personal pictures that I took while I was down there. It's me about 200 years ago. That's the Teletubby picture that I told you about at the landfill. It's my narcotics team right there. We were there for 12-hour shifts, and it's tiresome. So wherever we could, get some rest, we would just rest up. 343 New York City firefighters died that day. 23 NYPD police officers, 37 Port Authority Police Department officers, 15 emergency medical technicians, 3 court officers. All in all, in New York, 71 law enforcement officers died that day. I called a friend of mine who is in the NYPD. 226 first responders, NYPD officers, have died from cancer related to the World Trade Center. And that, my friends, is the end of the presentation. Brought you right to the bell.